The Las Vegas Raiders have decided to part ways with head coach Antonio Pierce after just one season. Under his leadership, the team ended with a disappointing 4-13 record, marked by a brutal 10-game losing streak and no wins in their division. This move adds Pierce's name to a growing list of coaches who have been let go in recent years. In the past 4 years alone, the Raiders have seen multiple coaching changes. John Gruden was dismissed in 2021, Josh McDaniels was fired in 2023, and now, in 2025, Antonio Pierce is the latest to go. To be honest, it was a tough season for the Raiders, but I'm still torn about the decision to fire Antonio Pierce. While I wasn't completely shocked, I had expected the team to at least give him another year. After surviving Black Monday, it seemed like the Raiders might let him finish out his contract. However, Mark Davis made the decision early today to move on from Pierce. It's definitely a tricky situation. On one hand, I get why some people wanted Pierce gone. The team's performance was abysmal. A 4-13 record, a 10-game losing streak, and just the overall poor quality of play, especially in some of those losses, really hurt the team. It wasn't just about the numbers. It was the way the Raiders were losing games that left a lot to be desired. Throughout the season, the Raiders often found themselves losing by 10 or more points, especially in the early games. It was tough to watch because it really felt like we weren't competitive at all. There were several games where it seemed like the team was outcoached, with the Raiders consistently behind the curve. Antonio Pierce's weaknesses as a head coach were apparent when it came to making critical decisions, whether it was choosing to go for it on 4th down, managing the clock, or knowing when to throw the challenge flag. There were also moments where it felt like he wasn't fully owning up to the situation. I can't forget how at times, especially in his media interviews, it seemed like he was deflecting blame. A good example was after last week's loss to the Chargers, where he essentially pointed out the team's glaring issues and called out players like Aiden O'Connell, which felt like throwing them under the bus. I totally understand why some fans wanted Pierce to be fired, given the disappointing results. But at the same time, I can't help but feel that he was set up for failure this season. No matter how you look at it, I just don't think it would have made a huge difference if a different coach had been brought in. Even if the Raiders had hired someone like Jim Harbaugh, I'm not sure the outcome would have changed much given the way the offseason played out. When it comes to the quarterback position and other key spots, it doesn't really matter which coach the Raiders had. I believe this season would have been tough no matter what. Let's be real. Once we saw that Garbers and O'Connell were the quarterbacks, it was clear from the start that we were in for a rough year. It just wasn't the kind of setup that would lead to success. And honestly, I think Mark Davis never fully trusted Antonio Pierce as head coach. It seemed like Davis wasn't completely convinced by Pierce, but last season he couldn't ignore the pressure from fans and players when it came to making a decision about the head coach. It almost felt like Davis was forced to give Pierce a shot. He probably thought, all right, I'll give you the job, but you're on a short leash. He set Pierce up with a new general manager and other changes, but I think from the start, Davis wasn't fully committed to Pierce long term. What stood out to me is that Pierce didn't seem the same this season as he did when he was the interim head coach. He had a certain swagger and confidence back then, but it felt like that disappeared when he took on the full-time role. I'm not sure exactly why. Maybe it was the pressure of being the permanent head coach, or maybe something else. It's possible that Pierce was on a short leash, and maybe he felt uncertain about the front office's trust in him. Honestly, I'm not sure what exactly caused the drop in his performance, but what stands out to me is the fact that firing him after just one season doesn't seem fair, especially when the quarterback position was still a major problem. On top of that, we had so many injuries on the defensive side of the ball, which definitely impacted the team's performance. I know it might sound like an excuse, but those factors were real. Of course, injuries happen to every team, and you have to push through them. But it's hard to ignore how much injuries affected the Raiders this season. The loss of players like Malcolm Kuntz, Christian Wilkins, Marcus Epps, and Jaron Bennett was huge. And even Max Crosby didn't look like himself this year. It's clear that Antonio Pierce was dealt with some tough circumstances, and it's difficult to succeed when so many key players are out. In my opinion, a head coach deserves at least 2 seasons to show what they can do. If we gave Josh McDaniels a second season, despite all the red flags he showed, it feels like Pierce deserved the same chance. Sure, McDaniels didn't finish his second season, but at least he was given that opportunity. Based on that alone, I would have been okay with giving Pierce 1 more year to prove himself. Also, when you look at the coaching landscape right now, it's not exactly in the Raiders' favor. If we were going to fire Antonio Pierce, I was hoping we'd do it right after the game on Sunday. I understand it was only a day later, but it just felt like the timing was off. Now, if we're starting a new coaching search, it's going to add more uncertainty to an already difficult situation. We might be looking at yet another rebuild. With the firing of Antonio Pierce, the Raiders are facing a lot of changes. We need a new head coach, a new offensive coordinator, and a new defensive coordinator. This shakeup of both the roster and coaching staff is going to be a huge challenge. At this point, the team needs as much time as possible to go through a thorough process. They need to interview the right candidates and build a strong coaching staff from the ground up. It's these little details in the Raiders' operation that always frustrate me. With Pierce gone, there's even more uncertainty surrounding the team. A lot of the players who were brought in under the Josh McDaniels and Antonio Pierce regimes might now be looking at uncertain futures. Many key players on the defensive side of the ball are up for contract renewals. Will they stay or go? A lot of that will depend on who the new defensive coordinator is and what kind of scheme they plan to run. The coaching decisions will heavily influence which players the Raiders prioritize in contract talks. Max Crosby is another big question mark. He's hinted at wanting his contract restructured, asking for more guaranteed money. Given the constant turnover he's faced in his career, it's understandable that he'd want some security. But I really hope we don't end up in a situation where Crosby gets frustrated and asks for a trade. That's the last thing the Raiders need right now. There's just so much uncertainty about the direction of the team. If I had to guess, I think we're heading into yet another rebuild. What's especially concerning is that I don't see any clear-cut candidates for head coach who would be a massive upgrade over Antonio Pierce. There's speculation that the Raiders are targeting Mike Vrabel and Liam Cohen, the offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But even if these guys are the top picks, I'm not sure if they'll bring the immediate improvement the team needs. Mike Vrabel would definitely be an upgrade over Antonio Pierce, but I'm not sure how much of an upgrade he really is. Plus, there are reports that Vrabel is the front-runner to become the New England Patriots head coach, so there's no guarantee he'll even be available. If the Raiders miss out on Vrabel, they might have to take a risk on a younger, less experienced coach, like offensive coordinator Liam Cohen. One of the most exciting possibilities for the Raiders is Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. The problem with him, though, is that we don't know if he'll leave Detroit. He's probably not going to take any job interviews during the playoffs, since he's focused on trying to win a Super Bowl with the Lions. If he does decide to leave, he'll be one of the top candidates for several teams, and there's no guarantee he'll prioritize the Raiders. At this point, with no clear quarterback and the Raiders holding the number 6 overall pick, I'm not sure how attractive a destination the team is compared to others. It's a little worrying because things could get worse. If the Raiders are able to land one of their top candidates, I would have been fine with giving Antonio Pierce 1 more season, basically a make-or-break year. Let him know that he needs to aggressively pursue a quarterback and work on turning the team around. Worst-case scenario, if the season goes badly again, then you fire him and start fresh with a new regime. And at least by then, if we have a high enough draft pick, we might be in position to grab one of the top quarterbacks in the 2026 draft class, which looks a lot stronger than this year's. Maybe we could get a guy like Arch Manning or Drew Aller from Penn State. But at the end of the day, Antonio Pierce got fired. Like I said, it's not surprising. Everyone saw this coming. And that's exactly what happened. One important thing to note is that this offseason, Tom Brady has officially become a part owner of the Raiders. He's also expected to have a say in the selection process for the new head coach, which could have a major impact on the direction of the team's leadership. This could influence the future of the Raiders in a big way, and it's definitely something to keep in mind. Personally, I trust Tom Brady to make football decisions more than I trust Mark Davis, who has shown time and time again that he doesn't always make the best moves when it comes to building a winning team. I'm hopeful that Brady will bring a more successful approach to the organization, and maybe he can help turn things around for the Raiders. But Raider Nation, I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think firing Antonio Pierce was the right call? Or do you think he deserved another season? Let me know in the comments below. I understand both sides of the argument, but I'd love to get your feedback. That's all I've got for today's video. If you're new to the channel and you love Raiders-related content, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.